People, and welcome back to another episode of Sync in Flow, the podcast. As always, this will be recorded on all podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. So if you would prefer to listen to it that way, you will also be able to. So today I want to speak about grief. Yesterday on Instagram, I posted a really powerful reel on the power of grief and how grief works its way through our system and how we tend to approach our relationship to grief, because grief is a super complex emotion. It is not one that we have been ever trained or given understanding to address and deal with. And today I want to speak about how healing your relationship to your womb and to your menstrual cycle really allows for you to heal your relationship to grief and start to see grief as a really powerful and transformative tool, a tool that needs to be harnessed and embraced and worked with rather than avoided, pushed away, denied. Okay, so in my personal experience, when I started to heal my relationship to my womb, I had a fuckload of grief coming up. I think all of these very heavy, dense emotions like grief and guilt and shame, they all reside in the lower chakras, specifically in the pelvis, in the womb, in the hips, in this lower half of the body. They're very dense. They can sit lower down on the spectrum of emotions and in the body. And so when I started to heal my relationship with my womb and I got my period back for the first time after coming off the pill, I was on the pill for 7 years. I didn't bleed for 7 years. I didn't cycle or ovulate for 7 years. And when I got my period back, it was a process of feeling a lot of grief and a lot of the emotions that had been stored in my womb the entire time that I wasn't processing, the entire time I was on the pill, the entire time that I was ignoring and suppressing the fact that I am in a body with a womb. I am a woman. I have a yoni. I have a womb. I have a cycle. I ovulate as part of my body's natural mechanisms, okay? And so when we don't have the capacity to deal with emotions like grief, like guilt, like shame, when they come up in the moment, when we get triggered, they store themselves in our bodies for later. It's not like they go away. They literally just store themselves in the tissues and cellular memory of our body until we are mature enough and ready to deal with those emotions. And that takes a lot of awareness. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of courage to be able to go back into the body and feel the things that we weren't able to feel in previous times. Okay, and so that's what creates the trauma. The trauma is the suppression of an experience in the moment that we do not have the tools, conscious or subconscious tools, to be able to deal with it. And the nervous system gets so overwhelmed and so dysregulated by whatever's coming up that the only way it can deal with what's going on is by freezing, is by avoiding, is by pushing away. And so that's not a very productive or efficient way to deal with emotions and to deal with traumas and struggles, because it just creates a greater problem for later, right? It's that snowball effect that happens with our emotions. So once we feel something, we don't like it, we push it away, we suppress it. Then a month later or however long, we feel it again. We're like, oh, there's that same thing again. We push it away again. And the snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it's like this insurmountable massive amounts of grief, trauma, guilt, shame, whatever it is, fear that is living in our body that we are now so scared to feel and so scared to face, because now the problem is 100 times bigger than, when it started. And unfortunately, this all starts in childhood. And so us as children, we didn't have the emotional intelligence tools to be able to understand, process, and deal with grief, shame, guilt, right? And so now as adults, we are having to really confront all of these heavy, dense, dark emotions that are living in our body and find tools and ways in which we can deal with them in an efficient and effective way that's going to not overwhelm us, but also be productive and allow us to go into it and eventually release it. Because your body doesn't want to store these emotions. It's storing it because it has to. It doesn't want to. It's storing it because it has to. And so you need to have the conscious awareness to give your body a break and allow your body to be able to release what no longer serves you. And we do this through embodiment practices. We do this through the womb healing techniques that I teach in my group container 6-week signature program, Liberated Womb, which is now available for early bird special at €333. So you can go to the link in my bio or the description of this podcast for more information on that. Otherwise, send me a DM and I'd be more than happy to chat to you about if this program is suited for you or not. So yeah, in my experience, when I got my period back, the first few natural bleeds that I had after, not bleeding for 7 years were very intense, very emotional, so deep. There was so much grief coming up. I truly felt like I was processing grief for every single woman in my entire lineage. I felt like I was processing grief for every single woman on this earth that has been suppressed, that her natural powers, her natural body, her natural instincts, her natural emotions have been suppressed because men have told her that is not okay. You're not okay. You're overreacting. Here's a pill. Shut up. Take it. Be quiet. Sort yourself out. Be neutral. Be stable. Be whatever, right? And so much grief comes up when we start to work with our womb, because the womb is holding not only our personal trauma and childhood experiences, but also is holding our generational trauma, the generational trauma of our ancestors, of our mother, our grandmother, our great-grandmother, our great-great-grandmother, our great-great-great-great-grandmother, so all the ancestral wounding and trauma is also stored in the muscles and fibrous tissues of the womb space. And so this is why when we heal our womb, a lot of initial grief, sadness, guilt, shame starts to come up in the beginning, because basically we are reclaiming our feminine body in a way, and our feminine energy in a way that no one in our lineage has done so for thousands of years. And that liberation, it is very emotional. It is very deep. It is very cathartic. It is almost like a river that has been dammed, a river with a dam wall that has been built, and the wall has been standing there for thousands of years, and now suddenly someone has started to break down the wall and bash holes into it and cracks, and then suddenly the river knocks the wall away and the river just starts flowing and flowing and flowing again, and all this water that is built up behind the wall can now flow and flow and flow and flow and flow and flow. It's this massive torrential force of flow. And I kind of see that's a really nice metaphor to see how the grief works its way through our system, right? Because our mothers, our grandmothers, and our great-grandmothers, we've all been suppressed. We've all been on hormonal birth control. We've all been out of touch with our feminine body, out of touch with our womb. The womb being this emotional, spiritual, cathartic organ that breathes and feels and has its own consciousness, has its own life force, has its own center, right? And so the womb, the sacral chakra, being the emotional center of our body. And so if we are on hormonal birth control, if we are disconnected from our womb because of trauma, because of sexual trauma, because of menstrual trauma, whatever it is, maybe we have PCOS, maybe we have endo, whatever you experience in relation to your womb is potentially disconnecting you from your womb, from your body, from your feminine energy, because you have not addressed the trauma that is sitting in your womb. And I can tell you this, every single woman that has not gone on a deep dive journey with her womb has trauma in her womb. Every single woman. I can guarantee you this. It is literally a fact. Because every single woman is living under patriarchy. Every single woman has experienced some sort of suppression, ailments, birth control, whatever it is, in relation to her body, in relation to her womb. Even if you're a woman who was never on birth control, you will still have trauma sitting in your womb because, like I said, you store generational, ancestral wounds and trauma in your womb. And so that's why when we decide to heal our womb, we are becoming cycle breakers for our entire lineage, for our entire family. And so it's this massive opportunity to not only heal personal wounds, but to heal generational wounds that have been living in your family's DNA for lifetimes, for over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And to come to terms with how much trauma that is, with how much grief, with how much suppression, with how much anger, with how much sadness, it's overwhelming for one person to process. Like, I can't even explain the extent to which how much trauma we store in our bodies that doesn't even belong to us. Science has proved that we store up to 12 generations of trauma in our body at one time. It is absolutely ridiculous. Massive amounts. And so that's why I see womb healing as a non-negotiable for the feminine, for women. It really is a non-negotiable for us as a society to heal our relationship to the divine feminine, to heal our relationship to women, to what it means to be in connection with the body, with the earth, with the emotions, with the spirit. And so these themes are really, really big. The grief that we as women hold in our bodies, majority of us are denying it. Majority of us are not even aware, because, we're not just grieving like our own personal and generational trauma. We are grieving man's disassociation from the feminine, humanity's disassociation from the feminine. We are grieving men's disrespect of the feminine. We are grieving the way humans have been separated from the earth. That is one of our greatest wounds as a society, as a species, is our separation from the earth, not living in alignment with our natural, organic ways of being, of operating, of connecting to the earth, of connecting to nature, the land, the elements, the animals, the birds, the plants. The nature is our medicine first and foremost. Mother Earth is our home first and foremost. Imagine the grief of a child being separated from his or her mother. The grief that causes in the mother and in the child, it's really, really big. And so that is what we're dealing with as a society. The earth is feeling the grief from being ripped away from her children. Like us as humans, we are her children. And we, the children, are feeling that grief of being ripped away from our natural ways of being. Our natural cycles, our natural seasons, our natural intrinsic organic connections to earth, to the elements, to nature herself. So and all the exploitation that has happened since that separation, the exploitation, the degradation of the earth, the degradation of the planet, ecological grief. That is another form of grief that we are dealing with, that we are processing, that we are holding and storing in our bodies. And so there are all these multi-layers of grief. The grief of not being in connection to our own physical bodies as women, not being in connection to our womb, not being in connection to what it means to be a woman, what it means to be in connection to our feminine energy. Then we have, the grief of our generation, the grief of the codes of the feminine were not passed down the lineage. The codes of the feminine were segregated, were separated from humanity by patriarchy as a tactic to control and enslave humanity. Patriarchy is a division tactic. It is a divide and conquer tactic. It is not accidental. The state of the world and the way things are right now, it's not accidental. It's all been done on purpose as a way to instill fear and prevent humans from awakening into our higher vibrational God-given gifts, our creational nature. Because we can't do that if we are stuck in our trauma. If we are stuck in these loops of feeling and overwhelm and trauma and disassociation, right? And so that's why attacking the mother-child bond is one of the fastest ways to create that violence and that generational trauma, because the mother is the center of everything. She's the center of life. She's the center of creation. She holds those codes for new life force to be generated. And so, we are grieving multi-layers of grief in our bodies. We are holding multi-layers of grief in our bodies. Like I said, the personal, the ecological, the maternal, and then we obviously also have the paternal, the masculine and feminine, also the union, the masculine feminine relationship, the grief in the way that men and women have been so separated, the way in which we have been disconnected from understanding each other. Not only do we not understand ourselves, are we struggling to connect with ourselves on a deep, intimate level, but we're also struggling to connect with each other on a deep, intimate level. Men don't understand women, women don't understand men, and we just have this tension that is not creating harmony, that is not creating understanding, that is not creating peace. And so the grief is sitting in our womb space. And we can use the menstrual cycle as a cathartic process to do shadow work, to release the grief, to release the trauma, to release the shame, to release the guilt. I did another podcast called Trauma Healing and with the menstrual cycle, so you should definitely go check that out. I think I don't know what number it is. So just go look. But I speak in that how we can use the menstrual cycle to cathartically process shadow work, to do shadow work, Each phase of the menstrual cycle has a gift and a shadow. Each phase has an invitation in which how can we trust ourselves more deeply and work with whatever's coming up, So I'll just quickly run through the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle and show you how we can do shadow work through them. So the follicular phase, which is spring, this is all about creation, organization, and planning. The shadow that can come up in this time can be overwhelm, can be self-doubt. And so we get to work with that. Then we move into ovulation. And this is all about productivity and creation and getting things done. The shadow that can come up during that time can, again, be self-doubt, lack of motivation, lack of creativity. And so we then move into the autumn phase. And this is when, we start to slow down, we become more internal. The shadows that can come up during this time are related to vulnerability, to PMS, to feeling emotional, to feeling overwhelmed, to feeling frustrated, to feeling angry. And then in the menstrual cycle, when we menstruate, the gift of this time, so the gift of the autumn is really being in more connection with our internal world, being in deeper connection to spirit, being in deeper connection to our more contemplative, reflective nature. And then we get into the menstruation, and this is the gift of this time is rest, is slowing down, is stillness, is recalibration, is reset. And the shadows that can come up during this time are grief, are shame, are guilt. The guilt of resting, the shame of having a cycle, the shame of can I rest without feeling overwhelmed, with feeling like it's okay for me to rest? Can I allow myself to rest? And then also working with the grief that comes up. This is when our body is shedding. The endometrium lining, the blood is being shed and being let go from the previous cycle. And so all of the emotions and things that have built up from the previous cycle are going to come up in the menstrual cycle, in the menstruation time. Because this is a really powerful time where the body's like, okay, we are shedding, we are letting go. Everything is coming up for a reason for you to let go. So you may as well not only let go physically, you may as well learn to let go emotionally. And that's why we get we can be really emotional on our menstrual cycle, because all of these emotions, they don't want to stay buried in the body anymore. They want to be let go. They want to be released. They want to flow and let go so that you can make space for new energy and new ideas and creativity and emotions and experiences to come and take their place. So grief, we can work with it in a really tangible way. We can do shadow work with the menstrual cycle in this really practical way. Shadow work doesn't have to be this out of body, scary, weird, woo-woo, confusing concept. No, shadow work can be really practical, really easy, and really straightforward. We just have to have the courage to go into the shadows, the courage to face and look in all the places that we don't want to look, that we don't want to address, and acknowledge that, yes, even me, I still hold some patterning in my body that doesn't serve me. I still hold toxicity. I still hold emotional reactivity. I still hold anger. I still hold all of these emotions, and none of it is bad. It's just there, and we just have to be with it. There's no hierarchy of emotions. There's no good or bad emotions. It's really about, are we prepared to face what is there? Grief is something that needs to be faced head on. We cannot ignore our grief. We cannot suppress our grief, because it just snowballs. It just creates a bigger problem. The more we suppress and push it away, the harder it's going to knock us and hit us in the face whenever we feel. Because sometimes grief can be like a tsunami. It can be uncontrollable. It is just this giant wave that comes and hits you and crashes you and bashes you down. And there is no stopping it. And that's when you need to allow the tears. Another way that working with our womb and healing our relationship to our womb helps heal our relationship to grief is it teaches us how to feel, how to allow ourselves to go into the feeling, to be with the feeling, not shaming it, not suppressing it, not pushing it away, not resisting it, but just feeling like this is what's here for me today. This is the grief I'm dealing with. How can I feel it? How can I acknowledge it? If I need to lie on the floor and cry for an hour in the fetal position, that is what you fucking need to do. That is what you need to allow yourself to do. Because even though by society standard that may not be productive, on an emotional, cathartic, spiritual level, that is very productive. That is like crying is such a powerful way to release energy, built up energy in your body. Crying dysregulates you, re-regulates you. It lets go of cortisol, it down-regulates cortisol, and it helps you to come back to homeostasis and come back to a balanced, regulated, stable nervous system. That's why you always feel better after crying. You always feel so much better after a good, deep cry. And so working with our womb and healing our womb allows us to be able to go into these emotions on a much deeper level and just learn to accept that this is the energy that's moving through me right now. This is what wants to come through. And I'm not going to be that damn wall preventing the river from flowing. I'm going to open the gates, open the floodgates, and allow for the river to flow and do its thing. And I will be here witnessing that flow and witnessing those emotions. And when the tsunami becomes a gentle wave, that's when I can, take back control and be like, okay, that was a process. That was something that had to come through. And that's when you can journal and reflect mentally. But first, you have to do the physical, somatic, cathartic releasing through crying, through somatic experiencing, through bashing pillows, through bashing your hands, through jumping up and down, shaking, whatever it is. And there are many, many different somatic experiences. Somatic experiencing is a psychological term, a therapy term for a form of therapy that involves releasing emotions through the body. And so there are so many different somatic experiencing tools, and these are tools that I teach in my Liberated Womb container, which is now on Early Bird Special. I highly recommend go look at the sales page, and I highly recommend signing up. Early Bird Special ends at the end of September, on the 30th of September, and then we start on the 30th of October, and then we will have 4 weeks of the normal price, which is $444. So if you want to get this program and you want to be in my world, and everything that I'm speaking about is tickling your brain and sounds interesting, and you feel like you have some unacknowledged grief in your womb that you need to process and heal, and you want to become a cycle breaker for your lineage, please feel free to reach out. Send me a DM on Instagram. Go look at the links below. Go look at the sales page for Liberated Womb. The Early Bird Special is only available for the next 3 weeks or so, just under 3 weeks. And I would love to have you a part of this round. It's going to be really special. There's over 40 hours of pre-recorded content in the back end portal. And then you get one weekly 2-hour group coaching session with me for 6 weeks, plus some other bonus guest lectures, which I'm very excited for. I'm busy finalizing the guests that are going to come on this round, and that is just, yeah, very, very exciting. So yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. If you are watching on Instagram, go check out the podcast, Sync and Flow, the podcast on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify and Apple, please don't forget to leave me a review. It really, really helps me. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're watching on Instagram, go check out the podcast on the other platforms. And I'm sending you all so much love. Thank you for being a part of this community. And I will see you in the next one. Ciao for now. Mwah.